My name's Allie Boddington and I work in the HR transformation team at Oracle. My role and team focus on being able to identify and unlock the business value that our HCM technology can create for our customers to optimize their return on investment. So it's a real focus on business value. My brain has always preferred to work with numbers than it has with words, really. And even though I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to uni, half of my degree was in stats and the other half was in psychology. And whilst I was working at a cinema while I was at uni, I started to do the recruitment and schedules and payroll and all the HR people activities, which kind of led me into a long career in HR before I recently joined Oracle. But in all honesty, I've always been really data frustrated working in HR. And on reflection, I know that I would have been much better in my job all along the way if I'd had better access to quality data and analytics. And my curiosity in this space led me to want to improve the HR access to quality data, determine facts, and really aid decision making with great analytics. So enough about me. What we're going to cover today then, we're obviously here to really focus on persuasive analytics, but I know that this is actually a reaching aspiration for a lot of HR teams today. So I'm going to start by just reflecting on the journey that HR as a function has made to understand why analytics is not a unanimously embedded strength yet, and then have some reflection on why it is that people analytics is hard to embed quickly, and then thinking also about what HR can do to really embed persuasive analytics, although I know Ian's going to talk more about that as well in the session after. So I thought it'd be good to just take a quick temperature check to start with. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a poll. So it'd be great to know where you think you are from a maturity level in people analytics. So give us a bit of an indication of where you feel you are today. Okay, got some trends coming through there. Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Hopefully that's given you some level of reassurance that you're not alone in where you think where you're pitching your current level of maturity. But it's probably not surprising because you've come along to the session today that, you know, we've got a big chunk of you feeling like you're kind of in about the 5 area, some outliers, top and bottom. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Gives us a great opportunity to feel about where you are, but also hopefully, as I say, a bit of reassurance that you're not alone with some way to go on the journey. So I thought I'd kick off with a bit of fun about facts. If I can move my slide forward, that would help. Hold on a second. There we go. To get us in the right space about really thinking about how important facts are. The reason being that we do recognise that when facts are not available, we tend to make up what we think and create an opinion that can only be based on what we know or what we have experienced. And in fact, it's worth mentioning that in recent studies, one of the reasons given for diverse teams being higher performing is that with diversity, people are less likely to find common ground with their thoughts and their opinions. And therefore, they find common ground in diverse teams by seeking the data, seeking the facts, and that's been correlated with higher performance. So the facts are really important for rounded decision making. And one of my go-to books for this is one called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. So second book plug of the day. In this book, Hans focuses on how much we actually really know about some key facts around the world. So I thought I'd start with just putting 3 of these questions up. He begins his book with a set of 13 questions just to test readers on where they're currently at. So have a quick go at what you think the answers might be to these questions. So in the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has either almost doubled, remained more or less the same, or almost halved. So just scribble down what you think about that quickly. The second one is, what is the life expectancy of the world today? Is it 50, 60, or 70 years? And the third one is, how did the number of deaths per year from natural disasters change over the last 100 years? Has it more than doubled, remained about the same, or decreased to less than half? So in the interest of time, I'm going to rattle on with the results of those. But essentially, all of the answers to those three questions is C. So in the last 20 years, the proportion of world population living in extreme poverty has almost halved. The life expectancy in the world today is 70, and the number of deaths from natural disasters had decreased by nearly a half. And if you didn't do very well on those questions, it would probably be good to know that you're not alone. In fact, Hans tested a lot of people with this information, with these questions, and they aren't in the UK. Less than 1 in 10 people, 9% of people would get that answer right. He also looked at sharing these questions with highly educated people who really took an interest in the world. And yet a stunning majority got a lot of the answers wrong. And in many cases, the highly educated were worse than the general public. So it wasn't really a question of intelligence either. Everyone seemed to get the world wrong. The test results were actually worse than random. So if you totally randomly answered the first 12 questions with A, B, and C, even if you asked an animal to choose A, B, and C, you'd get about 4 right. But testing humans, he found that they scored at 2 out of 12 of those questions that he asks. So quick exercise to demonstrate the power of data, but also to get you to think about how much do we really know about the people working in our organizations, and have a shared factual view with our leaders in our business about the actual factual data behind the people that are working in our teams. So let's crack on with a bit of a reflection, if you like, on how the role of HR has developed. Where have we started from in this space? And the purpose of this is just to give a bit of an overview of actually the role and purpose of HR has changed quite quickly over the last 20, 30 years, from being a very sort of personnel management, pay and compliance focused team to responding to employee expectations changing and growing with regard to career progression and training. There's more kind of elements of expertise around learning stuff that was required from an HR perspective. And then we moved into the business partnering era, where essentially, technology was a contributor along with other things, where operating models changed, etc. And there was a real people focus then on how do we attract and retain the right people for our organisation. But when COVID hit, the unthinkable lockdown happened, and we're all of a sudden in a position of really needing people data really quickly. The conversations that started about employees' health and safety, and then for making decisions about topics like furlough and enabling colleagues to work at home. The challenge then also grew. So more questions of data, more information being needed about our people. Are redundancies necessary to secure our business success? Do we need to hire more people? Have we got the right talent in the organisation? So really high demand in people insights, people data. And it's been a really tough time for HR. I was talking to somebody from LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and they're seeing data to identify the fact that HR teams have got the highest level of turnover and highest level of burnout, given their insights, the massive data insights from a LinkedIn perspective. It's been a tough time. So HR's also been on this development journey and suddenly in a place of needing and wanting to be that strategic business partner, but sometimes struggling on that journey with the data and analytics. So let's start to have a think about why that would be. So I'm just going to reflect here on what Nick shared, those 4 steps around starting with data and reporting, moving into analytics, starting to make predictions about what that data is telling us and what would happen if we make no changes, to then actually convincing people to do something with it. So those sort of 4 stages, let's reiterate those because it's really key. But it's hard. We've been talking about getting to this top end of analytics with HR data for a long time. So why has it been so hard? Well, a lot of the people that I talk to start here, right? So data quality is really critical. And for a lot of teams, a lot of businesses, given the history of technology as well, and the way that it developed by delivering processes rather than developed around the employee, is developed in silo. So there's lots of different data sets. There's lots of different kind of approach to putting data into different systems. It's often submitted it's not often submitted by the employee, by the way. You've got HR administration going on, moving data around. You've got manual potential for manual errors in that space, which is not great. It's being collected in silo. Sometimes it's being given. So if you're talking talent data, who's actually talking talent data? Who's actually giving that data? Is it the employee themselves, or is their line manager giving data for a talent review? And finally, as well, the data is not really that easily accessible. So, one of the key things here around cleaning up this data source is covered off here. So having one source of the truth is really important. I know, like, if we just say diversity data, I know that, in previous roles, I might have a core HR system with holding diversity data, which I didn't actually have confidence in, didn't believe, or it wasn't complete. So I'd go out and do a survey and then have lots of diversity data come back from the survey, but that would only be of the people that were in the business at the time. So it's not going to be an ongoing data source. So having one source of the truth of data is really going to help to create that quality. Having minimal touch points as well is really important, and employee ownership. So having employees own their own data is the way to get the highest level of data quality. And I've had people say to me, yeah, but are they going to be honest about it? If we ask them what their skills are they going to tell us the truth? And I think my view on that is we're in an adult relationship in business. So, let's not go to the sort of the small population of people that might not give you some of the correct data. Let's work on the mass that will. So allow the employee to own their own data, but they then need to trust you with it, right? And trust you with it that you're going to do something with it that's positive and it's going to be beneficial for them. There's quite a lot of activity going on in the space at the moment. I saw something on LinkedIn around data privacy being a human right earlier this week, and really and actually that was calling Google Analytics to order with regard to, is it kind of illegal the way that Google Analytics is using some data? So you need to build that employee trust so that people actually trust that you're going to do something useful with the data they provide, to really get that holistic view. And technology enablement here is kind of key. If you haven't got sort of modern technologies that are putting data into these spaces, then you're going to struggle in the outset with regard to data quality. So I often talk to people around how do they look at transforming their HR functions, and I like to sort of strip it back to something quite simple, and I'm going to overlay this with with an analytical eye. So we talked about, Nick said around, we already had loads of data. We've always had a lot of data because we've had to pay people. So the sort of foundation of operational excellence is around paying people. And for some businesses, this is really difficult to do, especially if they've got a high number of colleagues that are hourly paid and scheduled, and to actually pay them accurately is quite tough. And often they have a lot of people involved in getting that process right. So automating as much as you can around that, and having employees sort of have self-service to that will help you to clean up your data and release resource, if you like, from an HR function. And the next stage is then around those key elements of adding value operations from an HR perspective. And if we think about this from an employee data point of view, this is really enriching your employee data of your individual employees. How did they enter the organization? What's their talent experience? What's their ambition? What are their skills? And so you're growing that kind of data set for your employees. And then you're in a space of being able to go, right, okay, let's compare that to how the business is performing. So this is all about marrying up your people with your business performance. But if you don't have that kind of rounded, credible data around your people, then it's going to be kind of really testing for you to convince the business around some of the insights and the recommendations that you might have. The third stage is then around taking that employee rich data, their engagement levels, what they're telling you around what their ambition is, and then saying, right, okay, let's marry that up with how well the team and the department is performing in the business to find some really interesting insights there. The second thing I was going to pull out is around building capability. This is no kind of surprise here. The technology enablement is really important, but it's not enough alone. It is enablement, and it's the starting point. we've seen an awful lot of data experts being hired. A head of data and reporting is a pretty typical role now in a sizable HR function, whereas a few years ago that wouldn't have been the case. And that's great because we're really elevating the importance of data and analytics from an HR point of view. But there's also an element of how do you improve the team data literacy. So across the board, from an HR team point of view, HR is a people function, but our people need to also be able to talk with data. So how do we improve the data literacy of the team as a whole? So an element of combining those three things together to give you a broader set of capability in talking about data and analytics. And then again, sort of reflecting on what Nick was talking about earlier, it's all very well having analytics, but if you can't convert that into action that's going to be positive for the organisation, then you're doing an awful lot of work for not much gain. So asking the right business questions of the data first is really key, and bringing that analytics to life. So what's the business benefit you're going to gain out of having analytics that is going to tell you information about your people, and use it to predict what's going to happen if nothing changes, and have proposed solutions, have actions that you think are going to change the course of that data if that's going to be a positive impact on your organisation. So key things here around accelerating your persuasive analytics. There's a lot more. There's a great book by Dave Green and Jonathan Farrar on excellence in people analytics. It's really aspirational, high end, but well worth a read if it's something that is important to you to look at. But I'm just going to call out key things that I hear and talk to our customers about, but also from an experience point of view as well. Being able to identify important business questions is key. And when you're starting on this journey to build that credibility, start small. Don't go, try and sort of boil the ocean. Start with the smaller questions, maybe smaller teams, and have a look at, okay, what's going on here? What can our people analytics tell us about the performance of this team? Having confidence in your data quality is key. So if you haven't, then there's an element of exploring why is that the case. And when you lift the lid sometimes on some of the data sets that you're using and where it's coming from, it kind of will help you understand if you need to change something about where your data is being stored in order to provide that quality and the confidence that you have in it. If you're not confident in it, then it's very difficult to then relay to other people about the confidence that they should have in what you're trying to talk to them about. Built-in data literacy skills across HR, and that might be bringing in experts, but it also is about how do you raise the bar of the team as a whole and start talking data on a more regular basis. So those facts that we were talking about at the beginning, does everyone across the HR team know how many people there are in the business? Basic data points that are important to understand to inform your decision making. And then plan your stakeholder influence. Again, Nick talked about that, but that element of when you're changing something, we're getting better at talking about change plans, change management, how you impact change, how you deliver change, how you embed it in the organisation. And this is no different. And that stakeholder influence is really key. So how are you working towards being able to convert your analytics into action that's going to positively influence the business by really looking at a change plan with your stakeholder influence? And what's the prize then? Well, there's so much happening in the world of HR today, and it's being driven by employees that are changing their wants and needs of the world of work. Our employees are looking for more work-life balance, for flexible working, for a culture of empowerment so that they can really make a difference, for an emphasis on diversity, well-being, and for a lot of people, sustainability of the organisation is also really key. So some of the reasons they are that they're choosing their employer are really moving and changing. And on top of that, there's a lot of opportunity out there. We just focus on the UK market alone. In August last year, we topped 1 million opportunities across the whole of the UK. The unemployment rate is 1.5 million at that time. And those skills aren't going to match. There's an awful lot of opportunity for people to make choice about moving to another employer. We talk a lot about talent acquisition and retention, and it is really a really key element of business success, to not only attract but retain the right people within the organisation to deliver those business goals. Upskilling and reskilling obviously really key as well, to make sure they remain relevant and able to deliver. So some really big chunky trends going on here with regard to the world of work and from an employee point of view, and it's really accelerating the strategic requirements of HR. And so it's kind of really key that we are able to respond to that. So fixing some of these basics around being able to deliver some of those basic requirements quickly and simply is really key, but also being able to develop internal capabilities to really have time and focus on the things that are really affecting business results right now in these kind of key people trends. Oracle did a survey recently about AI, and it's readily available on the web, but 93% of the people asked, and there was over 14,500 people asked, 93% said they were reflecting on their professional and personal lives, and 85% weren't satisfied that their employers supported their careers, and 87% believe that the company would not be that the company should be doing more to listen to their needs. So there's a real growth in employee expectation from their employer. And as an HR profession, we need to be able to respond to those initiatives, really well to ensure our business performance. And analytics and data are going to be key to make the right decisions in that space. So I'm just going to finish up then on just a quote from a paper by Shuknikram and Sage Gavin here, where they kind of looked at, it's a really interesting paper, it's readily available online again, and they kind of summarise that the additional value from untapped workforce data could be as much as $3.1 trillion or £2.3 trillion. So there's a lot to go after in this space. We have made a huge amount of progress, actually. We are moving forward from an HR point of view in the use of data and analytics, but there's more to go. You're here today to explore that further. So I'll just leave you there with that particular quote. So thank you very much, and I'm going to take some water on that.
Thank you, Ali. Whilst you take some water in, I'll let people put some questions and comments in the chat. 3.1 trillion, that is an immense number. There's a lot of impact and opportunity there to be made. And you're right, Chloe made the point in the chat. There's been some great conversation in the chat about, at one point there was a view that, HR couldn't really be measured, HR impact. And actually, that has changed. We have come on from that. But actually, some of the dangers is around, are we measuring what we can measure as opposed to what we need to measure? And what are some of the ways that we can measure things like culture and those really important pieces? Thank you for sharing some of the principles around having data integrity and keeping that data integrity, because of course having that confidence in your data is really important. There was a question actually around, from Maria about actually the impact that some of the either changing legislation in China or GDPR constraints or data transfer agreements is having on being able to use persuasive analytics. Are you seeing that with your clients, and are there things that you can do to overcome some of those difficulties?
Wow, that's a big one. Yes, I mean, from a China perspective, there's different requirements, right? So, and across the board from a legislative perspective, and it's important, from a technology point of view that, and we do spend a lot of investment in making sure that the technology is there to support updated legislative changes, really quite key. But yes, I mean, look, we're in a bit of an elephant in the room. We're in an interesting and difficult place in the world today. What's happening with Russia and Ukraine is kind of testing us all with what does that look like for the future, and is likely to have impacts in across the board in a lot of different ways. So data. There's a lot of data out there, and it's growing remarkably all of the time. But the security of that data and the way that it's managed is important for all businesses to be aware of moving forward. So it's definitely going to be something that is closely monitored moving forward. Yeah, hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, Lorna makes a comment as well about the importance of external research in order to influence and persuade and make decisions in our business, but actually investing in ascertaining internal data is really important, and actually having the skills as well to persuade once you have that data. Yeah. Nick, you made a point in the chat there about the Twitter principle. Perhaps you could share that with the group.
Let me unmute. Yeah, the Twitter principle is, can you get your message across in 140 characters? Not 140 words, not 140 slides, not 140 bullet points, but 140 characters. I think, whether it's true or not, the research shows that our attention span is falling all the time. And I don't know about everybody else, but I get bored really quickly. So we need to get to the point quickly and really have an impact on people.